Welcome to today's Sustainability Series webinar, Making Soil Health a Working Concept in Alberta. First, I acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 6, 7, and 8. I also acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who have a deep connection with this land. My name is Carrie Ann Kohler-Monroe, and I'm an Environmental Program Specialist in the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. The sustainability webinar or series webinars are hosted by the Natural Resource Management branch and are really designed to address agriculture's industry's approach and initiatives on sustainability. If you'd like to ask questions during the presentation today, please type them into the Q&A window and they'll be answered by our presenter at the end of the session. And our presenter today is Dr. Derek MacKenzie, who has 20 years of experience examining geochemical transformations in soil reclamation and agriculture soils. Dr. MacKenzie has spent a great deal of that time studying the effect of black carbon on soil processes and use in managed ecosystems. Recently, he has become involved in soil health research and regenerative agriculture beneficial management practices, or also known as BMPs, and has been curating a database for Alberta soil health. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. MacKenzie, and for the presentation.
Great, thank you, Carrie Ann. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So yeah, thank you. And so I guess this is the first webinar lecture that I've given, and it's a bit strange because I'm used to looking at students in a lecture hall or people in an audience at a science conference, and so sitting at my desk in my office looking at my screen and trying to imagine people on a webinar call is funny. It's different for me, but so I'll do my best. But thanks everybody for being here today on this beginning of this lovely weather in Edmonton for February, in the beginning of the work week. So yeah, I'm going to present today Making Soil Health a Working Concept in Alberta, and this is work conducted by myself and a lot of collaborators. So it's a very collaborative work. So that's what the et al. Is for here. I'm in the Department of Renewable Resources, Faculty of Agriculture, Life and Environmental Sciences at the University of Alberta. And I'd like to present to you some of the work that my lab is doing currently on soil health. So I'll just start off with a quick definition. What is soil health? So soil health, I think the best definition of soil health is as a metaphor for soil function, which is proposed by Henry Anson. And really a healthy soil provides water, nutrients for plants, provides habitat for a diverse community of organisms, stores carbon, and filters water. So soil health is really a metaphor for soil function, and it varies by sector and region. So in Canada, that includes agriculture, forestry, oil and gas, mining from coast to coast and in the north. And in each one of those sectors, the definition of soil health is going to be slightly different, or the definition of good soil function is going to be slightly different. But the other thing to consider is that soil function is measurable, but we need consensus on how to do this and what to do with the data. And we need more data in Canada and globally. And the last sort of idea with soil health that I am fond of is that it's most likely easier to maintain soil health than to recover it. So we have very high functioning soils in Alberta. But if we continue with very intensive management, such as tillage and synthetic fertilizer use, the soil won't stay healthy forever. It won't function indefinitely, and there's lots of evidence in the literature to support that some of those intensive management practices degrade soil function over time. And so, given that we have very healthy soils today, it's likely easier to maintain that function today than try to recover it later on. Just like it is for human health, it's much easier to stay healthy than it is to try to recover from health issues in the future. And so the last thing is just that soil health equals human health, which is saying that Shorty Fensky has been proposing this past year or two, and I really agree with him. So why should producers care about soil health? And it's like, I think that for the most part they already do, because they're good stewards of the environment, and producers are some of the original proponents of agricultural sustainability. I think that everybody should care about soil health because we should all want to be part of the solution to climate change. And so there's a large potential for soil carbon storage in our agricultural soils globally. And so if you haven't already seen the Netflix documentary Kiss the Ground, I highly recommend watching that documentary. It's very good. There's an opportunity to increase economic output. So there's a carbon economy developing. There's already carbon credits for no tillage, but there could be more for regenerative agriculture. And so producers should and can be paid for sequestering carbon, but we need better data and better quantitative environment to track carbon storage in soils. And the markets are shifting. So more consumers want sustainable production. And so this is shifting demand for products with tracking from farm to table. So my lab at the University of Alberta is called the Soil Plant Relations Lab. And I'm going to go over some of the research that we're doing currently in soil health in 3 different phases. And so phase 1 is has to do with the soil quality monitoring project and is really accumulating baseline data. And this is the data set that we inherited from Alberta Agriculture and the soil samples that I'll talk about in a moment. And then phase 2 is trying to build a database for Alberta Health, so the DASH and the DIRTS Health app. And I'll tell you what the DIRTS acronym is later on. It's kind of a mouthful. But really, this is database assembly that's ongoing currently. And phase 3 then is regenerative agriculture and looking for experimental data to try to inform producers in the future about what kinds of BMPs are available for maintaining and maybe even improving soil health and carbon sequestration. So we'll start with phase 1, soil quality monitoring project. So the government of Alberta started the SQMP in 1997 and collected soils every year till 2007. And they did this at 1 to 2 farms in every ecoregion across the agricultural zone, across the white zone in Alberta. So it's 42 total benchmark sites. And they collected 2 soil depths, 0 to 15 centimeters and 15 to 30 centimeters, or 0 to 6 inches and 6 to 12 inches. And I've been having sort of a good time working with my producer partners trying to convert them to metric. And so for one of them, I actually printed a conversion chart from imperial to metric, so for pounds per acre to kilograms per hectare, and I laminated it. And I jokingly suggested that he, keep it in his tractor at all times so that we can talk in the same language, but it's really just a joke. Anyway, and they also collected from 3 landscape positions, the upper, middle, and lower slope position. And they measured, and they did this every year between 1997 to 2007. They visited these same fields every year, collected soil samples from roughly the same locations. They have a bunch of farm, and so not only is there soil data to go at this, but there also was best management practices, crop rotations, and some yield data. And they measured soil physical chemical properties, including bulk density, texture, total carbon and nitrogen, salinity, acidity, pH, CEC, base saturation, etc. And they surveyed producers on management practices and yields. And they archive samples from each collection. So there's about 3,000 to 4,500 millimeter jars of soil. And this is what really piqued my interest when I was having conversations probably about 10 years ago with Len Krasnowski, and he mentioned that this archive exists. It really piqued my interest because it's possible to continue or to measure more than just elemental carbon and nitrogen, but to sort of measure carbon sequestration and wet aggregate stability on these archived soil samples. So this really represents a gold mine of potential data. And so we wrote a proposal to Agriculture Funding Consortium and ARDAR to resample all of these sites in 2019 and 2020, and we added indicators of soil health, including carbon stability, microbial diversity, and invertebrate diversity. And so this is what 4,000 jars of soil looks like, just in case you're wondering. There's 11 pallets with about 30 boxes on each pallet, and we basically secured a material transfer and data transfer agreements with the government of Alberta and have taken possession of the data set and the soil samples and moved them to the Breton plot. So we had to, so logistically this was challenging. We spent a day moving these samples to the Breton plots, and we'll spend a significant amount of time this summer cataloging the samples with barcode system to get them into the database and to make sure that we know exactly what samples we have for trying to measure carbon stability in these soil samples. So quite a bit of work logistically to move them, and still a lot of work to do in cataloging them. And these are the benchmark sites across the province. So there's 42. So these black dots represent a farm where samples were collected in these different eco-regions, sort of from southern Alberta all the way up into the Peace River region. And just to, I include this figure just to give you an idea of the logistics. I mean, this is a challenging project to get soil samples from, and it's amazing that the government was able to secure samples from each of these sites for 10 years in a row. And it's, there was a network of soil scientists working who could produce these. And so we reached out to the regional research associations to help us with sampling these, and that worked in some cases and didn't work so well in other cases. And so we had a small team from the University of Alberta with a truck and sampling tools who went out to visit sites, but these different concentric rings represent, so the green ring is 100-kilometer radius, the red ring is 200-kilometer radius, and the blue ring is 300-kilometer radius. And so anything under 200 kilometers was a day trip. So you could see that, in one day you might be able to go get this site 738 and 730. In a day you might get 678 and 615. But anything outside of this in the Peace River region, this is all logistically more work, and it represents, a week of sampling. And it's challenging because we waited for sampling, or all of the sampling on this project occurred post-harvest. And so you have this very narrow window, sort of from late September to the beginning of November before snow flies, when you try to get out there and sample these soils from these, incredibly far away sites. So it gave me a real appreciation for the size of the province. And so this is just me out at one site, probably in special area 3 or 4 down by Drumheller, sampling some soils. And so, yeah, I mean, it's in October, it's already getting pretty cold out there. And then I just thought I'd present a little bit of preliminary data. So this is just total organic carbon over the course of the government's measurement period, and then ours. There's about, so from 2006, 2007 to 2020, there's about 13 years in between here. So this is why the x-axis is broken as just year, and the y-axis is total organic carbon in percent. And you can see that there's quite a large jump at the end. And we believe that upward trend is most likely a result of broad adoption of no-till practices across the province. And what we'd like to do is really dig into these soil samples and look at carbon sequestration, which I'll show you on another slide coming up, to look at stabilization of carbon. So it's not enough just to look at the total organic carbon. You really need to look at where is the carbon, or how is it being stabilized in the soil? Is it being stabilized chemically or physically in an aggregate or mineral associated organic matter? We also looked at bacterial diversity, and what we found was that both ecoregion and agricultural practice influence soil physical chemical variability. And so you can see we have these 7 different ecoregions up here, and then we have ag practices on the bottom. And on the left-hand side, we have physical chemical parameters. And on the right-hand side, we have soil bacterial community composition. And these bar charts represent Euclidean distances from ordination analysis. And so this is basically a multi-factor statistical environment where we're looking at all of the soil physical chemical parameters together and looking at for similarity or dissimilarity between sites. And so we can see that ecoregion has a significant effect on similarity for physical chemical properties and for bacterial diversity, although not significant. There is some variability. Whereas ag practices, in this case, we're looking at tillage with high, low, and zero till, had a significant effect on soil physical chemical parameters. And so this really just shows that there's differences between the profile of data, and it's not suggesting whether or not these practices are improving or decreasing soil function. That's sort of still to come. These are just preliminary results showing that how these different variables affect the overall distribution. And so again, with soil bacterial community composition, a significant difference in terms of this ag practice of tillage or no tillage. So yeah, bacterial heterogeneity followed a similar patterns to physical chemical variability. We also looked at mesofaunal diversity. So these are soil invertebrates like this water bear or tardigrade. So this is mesofaunal diversity, and just briefly shows that soil invertebrate distribution varies significantly by ecoregion. So you can just see we have three different classifications of mesofauna, cari, and collembola, and their distribution in these different ecoregions is significantly different. And then finally, what we're going to do with these samples is we're just starting now. I have a PhD student who's starting to do soil fractionation and carbon stability on these soil samples, including the sort of most recent ones from 2020 and the archive soil samples as well. And so with fractionation, we basically we break these soil samples down into three different size fractions, and the three fractions are a non-aggregated MAOM, so non-aggregated mineral-associated organic matter, then an aggregated mineral-associated organic matter, and a particulate organic matter. And so the particulate organic matter is probably the most susceptible to decomposition. The non-aggregated MAOM is in the middle for stability, and the aggregated mineral-associated MAOM is the most stable carbon fraction. And what this and so then we're applying Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy to this and looking at different regions for carbon stability. So with the idea that the region in here around 650 represents aromatic carbon, so more chemically stable carbon. And then by fractionating this, we can look at, is there more chemically stable carbon in the more physically stable fractions? And so this really is going to tell us more about the potential for carbon sequestration and how that has sort of changed historically, but with the archive samples, but also how contemporary management practices may be affecting carbon sequestration. So I'll move on to phase 2 of our research, is looking at the database for Alberta soil health, which we're calling the DASH. And basically, we received funding in January 2022 from Alberta Innovate's SAPDEC program to create a soil health database and an app for management. And it's basically 2 years of funding where we're working in conjunction with myself in soil science and partners in biosciences for microbial genomics and data scientists at the University of Alberta for the database management and machine learning. And so we received a digital transfer agreement or data transfer agreement and a material transfer agreement from the government of Alberta in spring of 2022 to use the data from the SQMP study as the foundation for this database. And we're working with data scientists at the University of Alberta to bring soil science into the 21st century with big data. And so like, Google and pharmacology and medicine are using big data. I believe that soil science can use big data for helping with best management practices. So working in conjunction with others to contribute to this database to a national soil database. So this is not only a regional phenomenon in Alberta, but it's also, there's a national phenomenon, a global phenomenon where soil science across the world is moving into this big data environment and really trying to look at global climate mitigation. So why is a database needed? So, well, I think it's needed because not only the power of modern sort of computing and statistics and machine learning, but also because we have a lot of data that's just not very usable today. So we've been conducting soil surveys since the 1920s, and where we look at physical chemical parameters tell us about soil quality, and we gain a knowledge of potential function, which is important for management. But the data exists in the public domain, but has not been digitized. Therefore, it's not easily accessible and cannot be used by many people. Modern communication and machine learning make big data essential to management. And machine learning is another way of saying artificial intelligence. And so artificial intelligence is a real buzzword in media and with popular opinion, but I think the data scientists are moving away from artificial intelligence towards machine learning. And basically it's pattern recognition, so that computers are much better at recognizing patterns out of massive data sets than humans are. And so with this data, with database and machine learning, we should be able to establish baselines and a means of determining changes to local soil health. And we need global data to determine if soil management can mitigate climate change, because there's massive potential for soils to sequester carbon. But we need the data to show which management practices enhance that. So where's the data coming from? The data is coming from government data archives, publicly funded, therefore the database will be in the public domain. Historic soil survey data, data mining. It could come from pre-disturbance or an environmental impact assessment, so data mining. It can come from data sharing agreements with soil testing labs or other institutes like crop insurance organizations. And we're going to set up data sharing portals on a website for individuals. And so this will be a farm data capture system. So our hope is that producers see the value of sharing data so that everyone benefits from that knowledge, so that the more data that individual producers share from their region, the better their neighbors will be able to predict their soil function from that data with the database environment. And so it's really neighbors helping neighbors is sort of how we're proposing this. How do we measure soil health? So there's a need for global consensus on the quantification of soil health, because I sort of make a joke. If you ask 10 different soil scientists how to measure nitrogen availability, you'll probably get 10 different answers. And that's not really that functional for comparing data across regions. And so we need a consensus on quantification. So like medicine, we need methods that work everywhere the same. And so I think medicine is a great analogy here, because when in medicine, you can take blood pressure standing up, sitting down, or lying down, but all three of those methods will produce a different number. And so they've standardized it across the world, where blood pressure is always taken in a seated position so that numbers are comparable globally. And so we can do that with soil science by adopting something like the comprehensive assessment for soil health, or the CASH system. And this is what I'm really leaning towards right now, because it puts these physical, biological, and chemical parameters that are very easy to measure into a soil health framework, and it quantifies the current state of your soil health. And it does that by looking at scoring factors with regional applications that could be determined from the dash. And so these are the scoring factors. And so basically some soil metrics are better as the value increases. Increasing indicator value represents better function. Some cases it's a decreasing indicator value. Or in some cases it's a function where it increases and then decreases, provides sort of negative values. And so regional data provided by the dash would help us generate these scoring functions. And this is just an example of the CASH data streams and scoring system. And so I know this is probably a little bit hard to see on the screen, but we have in this physical characteristics, we have available water capacity, surface hardness, subsurface hardness, aggregate stability. Then for biological parameters, we have organic matter, soil protein, soil respiration, active carbon. We can add some add-ons in the biology, so root pathogen pressure and potentially mineralizable nitrogen. And then in the chemical characteristics, we have soil chemical composition, a standard soil testing analysis package. And there's add-ons in the chemical data where we can add salinity and sodicity and heavy metals. And so much of this is already acquired through just general soil testing, but some of these values are not, and yet they're very easy to measure. And so I'd like to see soil testing facilities move towards including these in in typical soil testing packages. And so then based on scoring factors provided by, regional data provided by the database system, we come up with regional scoring factors and produce this comprehensive assessment of soil health. And so this whole system has been developed by the Cornell Soil Health Laboratory. And I think they're on the right track. And so they have scoring factors that they've determined for their region, which is in New York, state of New York. And so those scoring factors aren't going to function for our soils in Alberta. So we need to determine our own soil scoring factors. And once we do that, then we'll be able to apply this to same data. So this is just a made up data set, but they measure soil texture, and then they have all these indicator values in our different groups, physical, biological, chemical, and a value and what rating that gives. And it shows you immediately where the problems are. And so in this chemical side, their chemical health function is really good. but their biological function is not great, and they have some problems in the physical function, right? So their active carbon is not great, their organic matter and protein index not great, their aggregate stability is not very good, and their surface hardness is not very good. And so the overall soil health score for this soil comes out as 51 or medium. And so that's the first step in the database is to generate just a current soil health score for producers. And then next, what we'd like to do is start to design an app for managing soil health, where the DIRT stands for Digitally Integrated Resource Technology for Soil Health. It's a terrible title, but it's a fun acronym. So we call it DIRT's Health. It's regionally specific inventories of soil health based on the cache method and the dash. And so that dash cache is not on purpose. That happened. Honestly, I promise you that I didn't do that on purpose. That just happened by chance. And to date, or by the end of this year, so we have 2 years of funding. We're just starting the second year of funding for this Dash DIRTS program. I think that we'll be able to produce soil quality inventories by the end of this, but we're working towards generating soil health inventories. And eventually, with ongoing research, we'd like to incorporate data that shows that, how BMPs could improve soil function or maintain soil function, right? So management plans that increase soil health while maintaining the bottom line is going to be critically important. But we need more experimental data on management practices, and that includes plant productivity, soil science, rotational grazing, alternate fertility management, and economics. And so this is just a sort of a mock version of what this website would look like. So this would be the Dash DIRT system. So our icon right now is supposed to look like a server, like a database server, but also a soil profile. And then individuals would be able to log in and create a profile for themselves, and so then they would be able to upload their data from their farm. They would be able to use tools to access management practices based on their current soil function and their current crop rotational desires and maybe what kind of fertility they wanted to use. There will be some weather prediction function in here as well. So just a bit of a mock-up of what the system will look like. So then we'll move to phase 3, which is regenerative agriculture data. And so this is a project that my lab is working on starting last year. We received funding in 2022 from ARDAR to work with producers on alternative fertility management. And so the city of Edmonton is collecting source separated organics from households. So it's basically separating the organic component from your municipal solid waste so that the city can collect that and use it for composting. But they're distributing this SSO around the city perimeter for use in composting because the city of Edmonton doesn't currently have the capacity to compost all of the SSO they're collecting. And so our partners in Westlock are composting this material with various other waste streams for use in crop production. We need data to show which blend might increase soil health while maintaining productivity of 3 different soil types found in central Alberta. So that's what this initial fertility management trial with compost was based on plot scale research around central Alberta. And so the compost blends, so this is a picture of the compost facility. So they're at the Westlock Recycling Depot, which is really progressive for small town recycling. They're doing a lot of recyclables, and it's not just a waste transfer center. It's a recycling depot, and so Alt-Root Compost has leased land from the recycling center to do this composting. And what they do for compost blends is they take source selected organics from the city of Edmonton, and they mix that with wood residue from Alpac, wood ash from DAP Power, and gypsum from cement production in different ratios. And we also use biochar from an Edmonton company that is producing biochar for use in agriculture and environmental practices, and they're producing biochar from reclaimed wood, basically from construction demolition. They take clean wood and produce biochar from that. So this is City of Edmonton. And so then I mean, this is plot scale research. So this is my crew of graduate students and summer interns. And we were working with Colby Hansen and Westlock to produce these different compost blends. And so we made these 6 different bags of blends. We kind of mixed these materials together in his silage truck and then swept it out. And we basically had 13 different treatments that we applied in 3 different fields in triplicate, sort of in a randomized block design. And so treatment 1 was just a control, treatment 2, synthetic fertilizer, treatment 3, compost, treatment 4, compost plus synthetic, compost plus biochar, compost plus biochar plus synthetic, compost plus wood ash. So you sort of get the picture that we're sort of doing these trials to see which blends might function better on 3 different soil types. So we're looking at the 3 soil types we're looking at in the central region where gray luvasol, so a wooded soil that's being farmed in the Westlock area, a black chernozem, so a grassland soil is being farmed in the Wetaskiwin area, and a solonetzik soil that's being farmed in the Camrose area. And so because of this plots, and yeah, I'll just go back. These plots were 4 meters by 10 meters with 2 meters spacing in between. And so because these are small plot scale research, we basically applied these by hand, where we measured the amount of compost that we're applying, and raked it out, and then the farmers, and this is just surface applied, so it wasn't tilled in, it was just surface applied, and then the farmers did the direct seeding right over top of the plots. And this was the crew on any given, so we were on 3 different sites for 3 different days. This was the crew on any given day that worked on putting these together. So lots of manual labor here, but it was good. I think and then we spent the summer collecting greenhouse gas emission data. We took pre and post harvest soil samples that we're currently working up this data right now. And so these are just some of the data streams that we measured: crop productivity, soil testing, soil fertility. We're going to look at carbon stability, microbial function, and greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is all work in progress, with the idea that we're going to apply some of this data to this comprehensive assessment of soil health metric to look at how each one of these different treatments changes the soil health scoring factor. And what we're doing this year is we're moving this work from sort of plot scale to field scale. And so what we're going to try to do this year is from this data, pick which blends work the best in the different soil types, and then apply those blends at a field scale in replicated fields across sort of Westlock, Wetaskiwin, and Camrose area. And so we're still looking for producers to join this project. And we have the compost manufacturers have lots of contacts, and so but we're still looking for producers. So how does this fit into precision agriculture? So I gave this talk for a precision ag conference in Red Deer last November, and so I just put up a couple bullets about precision agriculture, and I also gave this talk for Regenerative Ag Lab presentation in Olds also last November. And so I just the last couple slides are just how does this fit into precision agriculture and regenerative agriculture. And so for precision ag, data is the backbone of precision ag, and more data will make it stronger. There will be more onboard tools for directly measuring soil health in the future. These include spectroscopic analysis of current soil conditions. So it's basically on tractor, onboard hyperspectral analysis of soil conditions, and that'll generate instantaneous predictions of soil fertility, carbon content, and stability. And then variable fertilizer inputs with other regenerative practices will ensure productivity and save resources. And we need to generate this data on regenerative BMPs for different locations. We're looking at these Living Labs projects, ARDAR funding, Dashdurt's Health, and basically relationships between academic extension agents and producer relationships, as well as the regional resource associations. And for regenerative ag, it's similar. We need a consensus on soil methodology for broad comparability, the cache method or something else. We need to generate data on regenerative BMPs for different locations. And again, that is including data that's going to come from the Living Labs, ARDAR, Dashdurt's Health. And this will be, again, the same sort of relationships: academic extension agents, producers, and regional research associations. We need to generate data on economics of these BMPs and the carbon economy, et cetera. And so this next phase of this larger project will include economists from my faculty. And we need to develop a leadership platform for soil health and regenerative agriculture. And maybe that's something like the Canadian Institute for Soil Health, because right now there isn't a lot of leadership. There's lots of funding for research, but there's subsequently lots and lots of labs all over the province and all over the country doing exactly this kind of work. But without a little bit more leadership and coordination, there's going to be duplication of work. And it would be much better if we just all work together towards the same end goal and sort of not duplicate each other's work. In fact, sort of benefit from the fact that, you know, I'm going to do this regionally in central Alberta. If you do this in the Peace River region, and someone else does it in the southern Alberta region, and then we put all of those together, it's going to be, we're going to get more out of the research. And so just to sum up, we have a website and a newsletter for update. We have a website, and we'll have a newsletter for updates coming soon. So this is a work in progress to be done by the end of this year. Then this initial phase of this database, but this database will need to continue being developed probably for some time. And the website and newsletter are not running just yet, but in the meantime, if you would like to email me about being part of beta testing of the farm data capture system or the app itself, you can email me here. This is my email, mdm7@ualberta.ca, or you can look at our website, which is soilplantrelationslab.ualberta.ca. And eventually I'm going to put everybody on a newsletter, like probably about a once a month newsletter that will just generate updates on where this project is at and how people can contribute to it. And so I'd just like to acknowledge all of our funding partners. So our University of Alberta, the Soil Plant Relations Lab, and we have our big funding partners are ARDAR and Alberta Innovates. So I need to add Alberta Innovates to this slide. That's an oversight. Altroot is our compost producer, the Government of Alberta. Circle T Consulting and GROW are some of our regional research associations that are consulting with us. And this work, we couldn't do this work without any of these people, including Alberta Innovates. And with that, I can take any questions.